Food to me it's way more than a business. It is my value in this world.
Millions of followers at this point. What does that mean to you to have that kind of audience?
First thing came to my head was responsibility.
What drew you to the idea of creating content?
I always wanted to be someone who had impact. It's the fact that the message we continue to go for every day is having impact and actually changing people's lives. If you're a content creator or if you're looking into the space of building a business around your media, the most important thing to think about is...
How do you define adding value?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Hi everyone, welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. Today, we are here with an absolute legend. What does it mean to optimize your performance? Well, we're going to find out. Whether working with celebrities or interviewing high performers or training as a high performer himself, this particular individual has traveled the globe to make an impact through nutrition, through philanthropy, through performance, and his work ethic. I am so humbled to be here with the entrepreneur, executive performance chef, creator, and just an overall kind human being, the one, the only Mr. Dan Churchill. How are you today, sir?
What's up, Beast? What an intro, dude. Glad to be here, man. So we made it.
We did.
We made it.
The hiccups along the way, but we definitely made it happen.
It's awesome, man.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a fan of the content for a few years, and I actually want to start off by sharing the story about how we met.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good one.
One day during COVID, I'm walking in Central Park and I'm listening to an episode of Dan interviewing another high performer content creator, Brian Mazza. And I'd known about his restaurant for a while. And I was like, you know what? I'm going. I am walking in Central Park and I'm just dropping what I'm doing right now and I'm going to go check it out. So I dropped what I was doing. I got in an Uber. I went right down to Charlie Street. And lo and behold, I walk in and the first person I see is Mr. Dan Churchill. And I was like, I don't want to say starstruck, but I was like fulfilled, man. It was definitely one of those moments where you get the opportunity to meet someone that you appreciate their work, their contribution, their effort, their content, and to have the opportunity to have a few minutes of your time. I got a tour of the restaurant, the studio, and like honestly, I've held you in high regard before that, but even after that, at higher regard. And it's just been really cool to develop a rapport and connect with you, train with you, and finally get this episode going, man. So,
dude, it was sick. I got to show you the studio kitchen. Like I remember that moment pretty vividly, dude, because I was like, wow, that guy's like just a full energy and excitement and just super curious. I love curiosity in people. It's a great thing to have. It's an attribute because if you have curiosity, I feel like you're always going to want to learn, figure things out, or approach situations with open eyes. And that's exactly who you are, man. It was really, really cool to meet you. Now we're chatting. We're doing it. We're on this podcast.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. And so I think we should start at the beginning.
Sure.
When it came to creating content, you were out there in the fields, I guess, of Australia
amongst all the kangaroos and the koalas and the crocodile Dundees of the world. Yeah.
But like actually, and you had this mobile pan that you were cooking with, filming yourself, teaching college kids how to cook for themselves, despite the fact that and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you were in school at the time. So the idea for the content and the filming of the content itself, can you just kind of walk us through that process of what it was like to come up with that idea and have the boldness to go pursue it?
Well, man, I'll tell you what, if you go to Australia and you see some of the landscape, we have, just naturally abundant living amongst us. It's easier to be inspired, like, I just want to lay here, cook, or, just sit down. And that was one part. I'm like, on one part, we have such a beautiful place in the world. I want to show it to the world. The other side is like, I love cooking so much, and I want to show you can do it from anywhere, and way better than just to grab a simple, little burner you can grab from, the respective Home Depot of Australia. And yeah, like, man, it was a really cool experience for me. I got to travel different parts of Australia, did that, and I realized pretty early on that food, like, isn't previous to this, like, food to me is nostalgic, it's intentional, it's somewhat like, romantic. And so the power of food to me was just, it's more than the taste, it's more than the nutrition by far. But I also knew if it impacted me and I had felt like I had been bestowed this gift of being a messenger for it, I wanted the rest of the world to see. In a way, like, I felt young men, like our young men, like we are now in this space, particularly with health, where we're a little bit more interested, curious. But I kind of bestowed upon myself to, like, okay, I'm gonna teach my mates how to cook effectively. And I started with my mates. I was at the time doing a master's degree in exercise science, so I got to work with athletes as well. And then that transpired into a unique blend of understanding the human physiology while still, most importantly, focusing on the practical aspect of cooking and how luscious and awesome it is. And then, then that just made me realize I have a niche. And it's not just like, this, man, like, you can hear my voice. I am unbelievably passionate about this topic, unbelievably passionate about it. It's way more than a business. It is my value in this world and where I need to continue to go deep. And so obviously there's a lot of things that transpired post me cooking cooking meals on a pot on a wooden crate on the beach of Narrabeen, many, many years ago. But that was the starting point for me.
That's honestly just the coolest story to see the trajectory, right? When you look back at what was to where it is. Even then, though, to your credit, it was very high profile, like, high quality content. Like the camera, the audio, like, you had that foresight. And I'm also curious from your perspective, content creation as a whole, that also requires a bit of foresight to understand the landscape of where things are going. What drew you to the idea of creating content?
I grew up watching not much TV actually, but I always wanted to be someone who had impact. I really did. Like, prior to being a chef, I wanted to be a professional athlete. And then I thought it was because I love, like, you look at my day-to-day and our day-to-day, like, I love the athletic aspect. But I thought the reason I wanted to do it is because I loved playing the sport, and that is, be it a small part, I loved the ability to impact people. And as you develop and you start to see things that are happening, I noticed that creating content was a great way to approach any audience. I was like, well, I don't see anyone doing this, but I see it being a thing, creating content in this kind of landscape. And I talk about this to my team a lot. I always want to make sure we're pioneering. What are we doing that no one else is doing that would still apply to, like, create what we call a punch in the ceiling? Because ultimately what I did was I essentially took something that was technically original that we may have seen on TV and just put it into perspective of a digital landscape. But I did it my own way. I used little external things, whether it be the environment or the audience or the purpose. A cooking show is still a cooking show. But if you target at young men to impress a girl, then you got a little slight little twist on it. And that's what you can see down the line. It's like, as you create content, it's so important that you're not just creating content for the sake of it. Number one, it's got to be quality and it's got to have a certain point behind it, whether it be simply entertainment or if it's like, if you're like me and like, I want value add. So what's my value add even from viral content? And that's what we kind of work on every day now. And
just to level set the playing field, if you haven't heard of this man, maybe you're living under a rock, I don't know, but millions of followers at this point across multiple platforms, whether we're talking about TikTok, million plus, YouTube, hundreds of thousands, Instagram, hundreds of thousands. What does that mean to you to have that kind of audience? Is there a responsibility? Is there an obligation? How do you feel about that?
Legitimately, first thing came to my head was responsibility. Always. You hear this Spider-Man quote, like, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's so true. I'm blessed. I grew up in a family that is so supportive, but also taught us to, my two brothers and I, my mum and dad, they're two completely separate people in the sense that mum's very emotional. Dad's like disciplined and like not emotional. But they created 3 boys, all of which are, in their own right, passionate about something. But they also taught us the responsibility of, what we all carry. And if you gave someone power, if they are a good human with great intent, they will use that power for the greater good, which is much greater than themselves. Contrast to people who take the power and use it for the wrong reasons. And I'm someone in the former category. I realize, and this is, I think, to be honest, maybe why we do connect with people on social and across other means. I don't do it for me. Like I love when people approach me and say, how much they've impacted me and impacted them. And like, that is the greatest currency I get, not because of the emotion I get for like feeling as if, oh, I'm popular. No, it's the fact that the message we continue to go for every day is having impact and actually changing people's lives. Today, people are cooking even less than they were 5 years ago. At the lowest point right now, people are cooking. So it's like, okay, challenge fucking accepted. I'm making my mission to change that. And so, yeah, I think as we continue to grow, it's like making sure we continue to create content that is both acquisitional content, so acquire new legendary community members, but also harvest them in a way that allows them to see a way of benefiting, value add, inspire, but also educate.
There's so much to parse out over there. There's this, you brought up the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. There's also the inverse of that, with great responsibility comes great power. And I feel like as you were kind of going through what you were just sharing, that you have amassed this great power through educating people on how to cook a meal, how to take care of themselves, self-sufficiency, self-reliance. You outline discipline also. I was going to kind of save your training regimen and everything for a bit later, but maybe we could touch on that briefly. You're also a savage athlete training for a sub 3-hour marathon. I know you recently also got injured during the Leadville 100. Maybe you could share a bit of the mindset in recovery and how you're now channeling that experience into training for a sub 3-hour marathon.
I think like just to talk about performance as a whole, if we bracket like, let's talk about performance, and this is to anybody. I feel not a lot of people these days do a lot for themselves. Everyone would class that as a selfish way to look at life. I look at it in the sense that I can't be the best person for my partner, Milena. I can't be the best person to my friends. I can't rock up to opportunities like this and give my best if I have not looked after myself. Me doing this training program and protocol to achieve a goal of running a sub 3 has been, every single time I look at performance, it carries a mindset. It helps support what I'm doing, not necessarily physiologically solely, but mentally, to make sure that I'm doing something for me, whether it be learning a language, reading a book, meditating, or just simply like hanging out with friends. I make sure I do something for me, because that way I can rock up and do the things for everybody else, and most importantly, look after my family. So with this sub 3, it's been an amazing experience. The first time I've had a running coach for a marathon that's dialed in speed. So it's been like when I was once playing rugby and you rock up to a training session, your coach lays out your plan, and from a headspace, you just do the physical stuff and you have to worry about the mental state. So it's really, really cool. But coming out of the injury from Leadville, I was fucking gutted on that mountain. So to bring people back up to speed, last year, 2023, I entered the Leadville 100. I trained extensively like anyone should for such an event. If you didn't know the Leadville 100, it's notable as one of the hardest 100 milers in North America, where you
100-mile race.
Yeah, yeah. Essentially, it's a 100-mile race on a trail, so it's not on road, or majority isn't on road at all. It's like 1-2 miles on road. It's also at altitude. You start at 10,000 feet. So it's a very challenging thing. And halfway through the race, I felt amazing. I was really on track to hit the time that I wanted, and I ended up rolling my ankle and doing a grade 2 ATFL tear. And it's crazy how those things take place, because I still had technically that was like on the main mountain, the highest point called Hope Pass that you're going over. I actually kept going, and you can get timed out, which is end up what happening. But in that time, I had this such rush of adrenaline, but despite the fact I couldn't actually physically move efficiently, my headspace was just to keep going. There was a lot of pain, but for some reason, the adrenaline and everything at the time was just, you just keep going until you're told you can't go any further. So I ended up getting to the halfway point. So on my ankle, on my busted ankle, I did 12 miles, almost a half marathon on my busted ankle. And that's not to say that I'm a fucking savage. That's to say how important the mind is. So I knew coming out of that like, hey, I'm not able to achieve my goal of finishing Leadville because of the way. And everyone's like, you rolled your ankle. I'm like, well, I'm going to be hard on myself, because if my headspace was mentally alert at the time, I would have noticed the rock to avoid it. I've put it upon myself to be even more prepared, less mentally fatigued, if you will. Despite my physical ability at the time, my mental fatigue must have set in to not notice a rock. And as little as that, that's the details I think about. As a chef, you obviously think about details. Coming out of it, I was like, okay, details. So as soon as that occurred, the next day, when we got back to New York, I was absolutely so diligent with my training and recovery. Rehab every day, red light, hot cold therapy, compression work, TheraBand, to the point that within 5 weeks, I was back running, not a lot, but like I was running again. And then within 9 to 10 weeks, I was able to do a decent enough pace. I ended up doing like a 3 hour and 23 minutes at the New York City Marathon. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what time you do. It doesn't matter. It's like people hit me up and said, how did you recover so quickly? And we talked about this offline before. It's like, just be intent, focus, be all in on something. If you are someone who is genuinely dedicated to a task, no procrastination. If you're intrinsically motivated, that means you're not motivated by the external factors around you, but what happens within. I was so dedicated to making sure that I would come back quick enough to run the New York City Marathon, and to make sure that I could be in the best position to set myself up to go into my new training regime, to run a sub 3, and then to also do Leadville this year without, any form of mental fogginess or anything like that. So major lesson here, whatever you set out to do, be intent, be 100%, be all in, and do the shitty little work. If that means holding a TheraBand up to your ankle and pushing it up and down for a certain period of time until you just feel it's the most monotonous thing, you keep going.
Taking care of yourself so you can then take care of everyone else. That's how we just talked about. That's what we just talked about earlier. And then now you're talking about intention. In the law, intent is defined as a conscious objective, meaning like you know what you want and therefore you will. And what's also interesting about intent is that you can form it in a second. And when it comes to the opportunity that you gave yourself at the top of the mountain in enduring a 100-mile race where you could easily give up and cop out, you elect to go the opposite way and pursue it, saying, I'm going to will myself through this. And also understanding from a performance perspective that, the contrast is you're kind of jeopardizing your health a bit, right? Where it's like, all I do is talk about optimization, and yet here I am, bit of ego, but a lot of intent. And I think what's important there is you also took that intention and channeled it into recovery. And then there's this resilient aspect where I know someone that you're a fan of as well. I believe you're friends with Mr. Ross Edgley. Resilience is suffering strategically managed. Learning how to navigate that and leverage it to then say, okay, how can I optimize my recovery? How can I channel my mindset and check my emotions so I could get back as fast as possible, so I could serve the people around me, perform at a high level, inspire individuals moment to moment, and live up to that responsibility that we were talking about earlier. I think what's very interesting about your content, your journey, and how you go about everything that you do is the authenticity, like who you are offline, online, in the kitchen, during a run. Like there's there's a level of focus, man. Like I have seen it firsthand that you know, you talk about passion, curiosity, and all these different things, but like there's a focus. I'm curious what that level of flow feels like for you on a moment to moment.
You know, it's funny. There's two pretty ironic times I get in the flow. One is probably running or working out. Particularly running. I find sometimes I'm actually at the gym and I'm legitimately on YouTube watching, you know, cooking videos or things I just want to learn about. You know, I'm very visual. So that's typically what I'll do. Sometimes in between reps, I'll just be doing that. So I wouldn't say I'm in flow all the time then. Definitely in flow with like a Metcon. I fucking love it.
We
Running,
differ there.
for sure. But the other one's cooking, man. Like there'll be times when Milena will come home and I'm just looking at onions sizzling, caramelizing. And she's like, baby, you okay? And I'm just like, yeah. You know, I've never done weed. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. You know, the only drugs I've taken are effectively alcohol, right? But she's like, it's the most stoned you've ever looked is just that state right there. But that's the thing, man. Like I find myself, they're my flow states, you know, and it's so important to just get into that where ultimately flow is this position where you have no matter what's in the outside world, you are just in your own headspace and in a great way. It's almost like you're thinking of nothing, but it's therapeutic and you're not influenced or distracted by things going on outside. And so, you know, for me, it's those two things. And it's ironic because they're the two things I love the most. I love performance. I love activity. But I love cooking. And so when you look at that to people, it's like, I ask friends all the time, when are you in flow state? And honestly, it's like wholeheartedly, they talk about the times they're having the most enjoyment is when they're in flow state. I find that actually makes so much more sense because people feel at ease, at rest when they're doing something they love and they can just be okay. It's okay to be okay. In a world where we are constantly stimulated by what's happening on social media and we use it to escape, me, myself, I've done that before. You know, I've just like, you realize how often do we look at our phone? Do you go to an app without even realizing we've almost created this pattern of behavior where you swipe up and then you automatically your thumb will go somewhere. And you're like, oh my God, why am I even doing that? Why? Because it becomes an automatic sense of escape. So like I now realize like, again, my non-negotiables, plan my training. I need to cook at home X amount of times a week. And I need to see my friends. Obviously, most importantly, I need to see Maverick, my lovely little bro, puppy dude, and also my beautiful girlfriend. Like they're the most important things I have to do. Oh, and every Sunday I now have this ritual where because my family's obviously not over here, my immediate family, I have to send them a newsletter every Sunday, a personal one. Doesn't have to be too long, but they're like my non-negotiables and they help my flow state. They help my mental state.
So you have anchors that help you kind of curate the rest of your week or also on a day-to-day that allow you to tap into that consistent version of yourself where you're the most fulfilled, joyful. You mentioned alcohol. I've heard you speak about alcohol. I'd like to kind of touch on it for a couple minutes because I feel like there's finally this movement around alcohol sure, it was a bad thing. Like everyone kind of knew that, right? Whatever. It's also there for enjoyment, etc. It's been glorified. It's been demonized. I find personally that for me, a few years ago, I just got rid of all liquor. I'll enjoy a glass of wine here or there. I'll have a few sips of beer. And honestly, I just did that recently. But before that, I can't even remember the last time I had a few sips of beer. And I never really imagined myself talking about alcohol in this like nominal phase where like I'm only talking about sips and like half a glass, right? Like it just interferes with my performance, with the things that I want to pursue. How do you feel about alcohol?
Oh, dude, it's a great topic. And I mean, I've shared this with the athletes I've worked with as well. It's like you can talk about, like we know quantitatively the effects alcohol has on our performance. Just look at our sleep. You know, I wear Whoop. I've seen every single time I have alcohol, it has an effect on my sleep, which means it's an effect on my performance. So if you want to be really like just quantitative about it, alcohol, probably not the best thing for you from that perspective. But Here's my other philosophy on alcohol, just like everything in life. Number one, I'm partly Italian. I'm a chef. So I grew up, I didn't drink that much, but I grew up in a world of chefs where they'd finish their session of, we finish service and we drink beers. Like I wouldn't do it that much, but that's a culture I did. I've also grew up in Australia, big beer drinking culture. Again, I didn't drink a lot, but I still grew up in that culture. I love red wine. Like I love not so much the flavor as well. I love the culture. I love Italian wine. I love learning about flavors and flavor, like how that came to be. I learn more about wine sometimes than I do about food, just purely because of the flavor, the aroma. Was it aged? Was it like, where is it? Like, it's fascinating. Like you can know if you pick up a bottle of Amarone, where it's from in the world because of the way it is created. So I think that to me is fascinating because it tells a story. Where do I stand on alcohol as a thing? Every Friday, not every Friday, but I'd say every Friday I love getting my Australian mates get together. We go to a pub called Spring Lounge in Soho and we have a Guinness. Could be one, could be two, and it could just be that for the night. But to me, that's like my mental requirement. Not because I need to do it, but it's like I love getting together with my mates. I love having a Guinness. It excites me. My endorphins, my oxytocin, like I'm sure is lit up with excitement for that moment. So on one hand, it's not gonna have the best sleep, and my sleep for those nights isn't bad. So it's not affected to the point where I'm like, fuck, I really need to. So I'm okay. But on the other side, it brings me so much joy. And I'm not like binge drinking where I'm having so many beers every single night. Like I don't drink during the week and I maybe have a night of drinking or two. Everyone's like doing dry July would be actually easy for me. I wouldn't matter. So where do I stand on it? Number one, it's case by case. How do you and your body respond to alcohol? If it's horrific, yeah, maybe you should really ease up on it. If you're someone who is going through metabolic issues, maybe you're having a case of you're potentially diabetic, you should definitely consider the health concerns associated with drinking alcohol. If you have a potential for fatty liver disease, you should definitely look at that. So there's a number of things you should factor in for your health. If you are like someone like us who's very active, very intentional with their health, and wants to go enjoy a beer or two, or maybe 3 or 4 every so often with your friends, it is not a bad thing. If you factor in the fact that you're probably going to have a shit sleep that night, right? The reason I say this is we are so fixated on health these days to the point that it is starving ourselves of enjoyment, and you have to have the balance. Life's about the journey. It's not the end goal. If you go through life making things so strict, you are absolutely strangling yourself of certain enjoyment, which means you are removing potential healthy hormones from giving you the satisfaction and health benefits associated with what they can do for your overall wellness.
Wow, what an amazing experience the whole day from start to finish. Class act. These guys were making sure my family was comfortable, made sure I was comfortable, didn't let me lift a finger if I didn't have to, and I'm so happy with how this experience went. You guys were great. Seriously, thank you for every second of this experience, and make sure that you feed the people that you're working with. Pizza, burgers, take care of them. They deserve it. They're working hard. They're burning so many calories, and as someone who likes to burn quite a lot of calories himself, I can definitely say that they were putting in work. So they really do mean it when they say it's a piece of cake. Inside the Inspired stands by it. It's a piece of cake. Performance in general is, for me at least, when I started to study it, I started to realize that it's not just physical, that there's obviously the mental component. I remember once I had a friend when I was first trying to get fit who outlined fitness and just health in general as a pie chart. And I told him, I was like, man, I'm doing the workouts. Like I'm showing up every day. Like I just don't have the body I want. Like what's going on here? And my friend got on the phone with me and he was like, look, you got to see this you got to see health in general as a pie chart. And look at fitness is 25%. And you have that 25% down. You don't need to put in any more effort there. Maybe it's time to focus on the rest of the pie. I was like, well, what's the rest of the pie? And then he outlined nutrition, sleep, and stress management. Some of the things that you've alluded to, and I believe this also falls into the performance aspect where You've outlined different chemicals in the brain that are triggered when you go through a fulfilling experience, when you tap into flow, or when you connect with people. You've connected with quite a lot of people. Your network in coming from, forgive me if I'm speaking on your behalf, from nothing here in New York, right? Starting at the ground floor. You've now managed to build this vast network of high performers, high net worth individuals, motivators, connectors, and the like. Do you attribute any one or two specific catalysts to your growth as a creator or an individual here during your time in New York City?
Oh, dude. Persistence. Because you can have talent. You can be unbelievably talented and you can get opportunities. But if you don't persist with your talent, with those opportunities, then, you're not going to succeed. And so I think there was factors that put me in a position to succeed at that time. And it's funny, speaking to you, it's like, I have so much more I want to do. Like, I feel like I'm still at ground floor. If I look back, and it's really funny, like about 5 minutes ago when you were talking, I just realized if I reflected on where I am right now versus where I started, it's actually like, oh shit, like that's cool. That's awesome in terms of what you're achieving for everybody, not you. And now it's like, maybe it's the mindset of persistence, but I'm like, fuck, look at all those people that need help and like can do it. And I believe in them, they can do it just by simply having the right person to help them. So I think that carries into it, man. Like ultimately, there's key moments I remember, like I got given opportunities. I remember phone calls from certain things, but ultimately I would say it was persistence with having the right people around me, persistence with putting the work in, persistence of making mistakes and learning from them. Many failures, so many failures, but just keep persisting, And I've learned so many things and I'll continue to make more mistakes. But I think if I look back on, I guess a consistency around maybe why things occurred is like, I can look at like why this position happened, not because of an instance, but because of a number of things that happened to get to that position. And, you can look at One Hotels, you can look at Center, you can look at AG1, you can look at me now, like, cooking against other chefs in other parts of the world, going to events. Like there's so many things you can look at. But ultimately, it's persistence.
I want to ask you about, we were chatting a bit about before this, your content creation, identifying the right synergies. You mentioned a few different partnerships, and personally, I used the Center application for about a year. And I developed athleticism. I was, cooking your recipes, Zaki's recipes. I was doing the ropes, like mobility workout routines. Those are ridiculous.
He'll make you work.
And it was like a good balance of everything. I use AG1 on a daily basis. And I'd heard about it independent from you. It was just like a lot of synergies, obviously, over here. How do you identify the right synergies and partnerships through your content creation journey?
If you're a content creator or if you're looking into the space of building a business around your media, I think the most important thing to think about is, number one, do you like the brand? Do you actually like it? Put the association of the glorification of the brand aside. Do you like them? Simply put, cool. If you do, that's great. Can you add value to them? So important. Because if you like them and you can add value to them, that's like, I'd say 80% of the pie you have to think about. I'd say the next part, which is also really important, can they add value to you that is not monetarily? Like, it's so important because unfortunately, people think about the finances before they even think about the non-transactional element of a partnership. Mm-hmm. And why that's a flaw is because there's like money will run out or money will only get you so far. But a bond over certain ideas, ideations, synergies is where it becomes like synonymous and where people see things authentically. For example, I've worked with AG1 for almost like over 8 years now, right? I've worked with Center from ever since its inception. Like these brands are so synonymous with my daily life that I was a customer before working with AG1, and Center revolves around the same life that I share. And it's funny when you put energy out into the world and how they come back, right?
Yeah.
But like I think about all the things that I want to do with these companies, and not all of them get accepted, but a lot of them do. So when you're working with someone and you're looking at sponsorship, I think it's so important that people, one, do I like them? Two, can I add value? Can they add value to me? And then think about like, okay, well, if they're going to support me in my business, how is this going to work? Let's take a podcast, for example. If you have a podcast and the podcast costs you $10,000 to operate annually, hypothetically, right? And you want to cover all your bases. So you need to have at least $10,000 worth of income coming in through the podcast through sponsorship. Now, you can break that down into episodes, and you can break that down into episodes with sponsorships. So, you could say you release, I don't know, 50 podcasts a year. All right. What's that, like $200 per episode you need to cover? So you can think about like, okay, how am I going to break this up? Is it going to be $2,500 per brand over 4 brands? Or is it just one brand that's 10 grand? Hypothetically, I think it's so important that people really think about the first two. And then when they're thinking about sponsorships, how you're going to go about actually getting over the line. And then another thing is important is like, is the right time to approach the brand? So you could be selling yourself short. Maybe you want to actually work with these brands so much, like you write a list of the brands you want to work with. But as a result of those brands being where they're at and you're at, maybe you want to work with them on a deeper level. But if you ask them now, you're going to maybe sacrifice what happens later down the line. But I would say if anyone's listening that's like looking to start this business and you're looking to support yourself as you do it, think about what you need for the year. Then think about what you like ways how you would either cut up the pie financially. But then I would look at ways that you can add value to brands that you like. And that is so important because before they even talk about money, it's like, how are you going to support them? And then you can ask what they can do to support you.
I think in the content creation space as a whole, adding value is definitely something that has opened up my eyes. There's different ways to add value, whether it's education, entertainment. When you make someone feel something, I think that is where the most value kind of comes from. You can't really put a number on a feeling, right? It's just, it's there. It exists. It's intangible. And when you talk about creating value, and I think that's probably been, at least in my own experience, the biggest difference in what's allowed the podcast to, to grow from an idea to now, hey, I'm interviewing Dan Churchill. It's really this level of fulfillment, but also realizing like, how can I create something that does add value? So how do you define adding value?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's one where value is broad. It is a broad thing. And for me, the value is, am I providing resources for people to learn from to improve their performance, particularly through food, right? That's my value. That's my superpower. I make food relatable and easy to cook. I also break down the ability for you to understand nutrition elements, but not from a dogmatic, bro-y, like too hard to understand, too like bro sciencey kind of like. I make it fun. Like it's the idea behind it. So like when I'm looking at the content we're putting out there, we look at, okay, what is this content going to do? Is it going to be an acquisitional content, i.e. is it going to be creating awareness around our brand and attract new customers? Or is it a harvesting piece of content where it may not hit as many people, but of the people who follow us, they're going to learn from it? I think it's really important to distinguish the two. So we have this series where I help guys cook to impress a girl. Really simple concept. In each episode, I make sure that I teach them a skill. like one skill, whether it be knife work, cooking a juicy chicken breast, you know, how to get the best roasting effort out of a roasting tray in general. So they each walk away with a skill, as does the audience by watching that video. But it's still a viral piece or intentional for like, you know, creating more awareness of our brand. But then when you come to me just for like harvested content, it could be me talking through the basics of like how to cook a perfect steak. Or when you're looking to run, what to have around your food. You know, like that's how you should distinguish value add, in my opinion. And that's just using my example. If you're someone who works in construction and you do some funny videos around construction workers, that's your viral acquisitional content. But then if you're teaching someone how to use a 2x4 to break it down into like framework, that's your value add, because I'm watching you teach me how to do something. I think it's really important that if you are someone who wants to be in this space, value add is the most important thing for growth, because it doesn't matter how many numbers you have, it's how many people actually listen to what you say.
Harvesting. You mentioned that word a couple times. Let's touch on the philanthropy. My own philanthropic endeavors, I know how they fulfill me. What does philanthropy mean to you? And I also notice that you tether your philanthropic endeavors to usually some form of a physical pursuit or otherwise. Let's talk a bit about your philanthropy and the impact that Dan Churchill is making on a global scale.
Again, if I'm here to truly make an impact on this world and use my power for good responsibility, then it also has to be in some degree either, in my eyes, measurable, quantitative, or you see the impact. So sometimes you don't see the impact. Me putting a video out and teaching someone, a lovely lady, a dude, how to cook, I won't see them unless they post. I won't see that, but I know I've impacted them some capacity, right? If I've helped someone understand their hydration levels to run a sub-3 marathon based on, you know, they've followed my practices, they understand maybe what to look inside their body when they, you know, when they're listening to it. Cool. Again, I won't necessarily know unless they tell me. But when you are able to get a company that you've worked with to donate 4 pallets of meals to an organization that will distribute it to places that are in need, you know that's tangible. I see that before my eyes. And it just shows like that's a key moment, right? Every year I run for the New York City Marathon on behalf of City Harvest, right? It's 1 in 5 people do not know where their next meal is coming from in this city, and 40% of food goes to waste. As a chef, that is horrific. And so those endeavors to me drive me to make sure that, hey, you are continuing to do things for a bigger purpose. And I think that's where we look at like even our partnerships now. It's like a big part is like I talked about, like, you know, make sure that you like the brand, make sure that you can add value, make sure they add value to you. Another one is like, will they support your philanthropic efforts? So the companies I now work with, they're in on that. You know, they want to support that.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge as you continue to grow. It's like, I think a lot of people wait too long before they start realizing they can have an impact. Before it's not too late, but like imagine if you started 5 years ago. And I'm not necessarily financially, like there's just a lot of volunteering you can do. And it's huge for me, man. Like I've got dreams to build kitchens in third world countries, not just to feed people, but like help them learn the basics of fundamentals of cooking. It's a life skill. It could potentially help them get a job. You know, like that is something that I'm destined to do and can't wait for that. That's a passion project. If you truly are someone who says it, walk the talk. You know, like that's how I feel about it.
There's this awesome quote that always resonates with me when it comes to impact. At the end of the day, I believe it was David Geffen. You know what David Geffen was? Massively famous music agent.
Sick.
And he goes, at the end of the day, no one may remember my name, but they will feel my impact. And that always stayed with me because 5 years of public service, 2 different countries, all my philanthropic efforts, whether it's through, you know, training and finding causes to raise money for the Goggins Challenge or the 1,000 pull-up challenge or the 1,000 push-up challenge, like those moments for me, like no one can ever take away. I was going to do, and the thing is like I would do those things anyway, but being able to tether some purpose bigger than me to the endeavor gives me a reason why I can actually see through the commitment to actually make the impact felt. There needs to be more awareness around that, how doable it is. Like, if I've done these things, you can do these things. Like, I don't find myself to be particularly special. You mentioned persistence. I mean, we've been talking for a bit about how you've traveled from another country to the great New York City and built a network, built a brand, built a business, built partnerships, and, you know, build meals from scratch for people all around the city on a daily basis. Like, this is the point of the show, to understand and to get insight into what an inspired individual who's living with purpose and intention. These are key themes and words that keep being reiterated throughout this conversation at the very least. And you see like the finished product. And this is also like, from a mindset perspective, you said it, like, you feel like you're at the ground floor, but also still appreciate everything that you've accomplished. And speaking of accomplishments, you've written a few books. You're coming out with a new book.
Yeah.
Can we talk a bit about that?
Yeah, dude. So it's pretty funny. It's very hard for an Australian to talk themselves up, or like, you know, even just be honest sometimes about how they feel about their success. But this book I'm extremely proud of. So it took me, 6 to 7 years to come to fruition to this book. And yeah, like it's exciting, but it's also, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, because, it's one thing to write books in a country, in Australia, and then to come over here with another book, but then to not write a book for a while, waiting for the right opportunity, and then for it to come to fruition, the amount of hard work and holding on to like this, it's a binder of pages of what you want to have impact on with. It's a tool, it's a resource. It's so exciting. So the book's called Eat Like a Legend. I think the book title hopefully just associates my brand with, I guess, everything that I say and speak. If hopefully people are chuckling right now going, fuck, it's a good name, or they're just saying that guy's
It is a great name.
That's very Aussie. But yes, it's Eat Like a Legend. Fortunate Chris Hemsworth's forwarding the book, and it's all around how you can use food and other aspects around food to help support your own personal performance journey. It's not like a health book where you, eat these and you'll get this. It's like actually makes you consider yourself, put yourself first. It teaches you to look at you as an individual and how you can improve your performance. As we discussed earlier, put yourself first so you can love others even more. So it's got a bunch of different recipes in there, obviously. We take into account people may be vegan, they may be obviously not. So we take into account that throughout the book. There's plenty of awesome cooking techniques in there as well. It's fun. We've got some chapters that are literally there to impress. So if you are trying to impress someone, instead of having to look it up, I've got a whole chapter for you. If you're someone that comes back from work at like 7 p.m. and literally has 12 minutes to cook, I got a whole chapter for you. But yeah, it's fun, man. It's a really cool product and we're pretty proud of it.
What I also appreciate about your content and your work as a whole is how you mentioned relatable, but there's also a simplicity to it. And in having made the recipes myself, there's so much benefit to the simple salt, pepper, olive oil aspect.
Yeah.
But when you curate your recipes and create this value and create something from scratch, it's an art in and of itself. And I've seen it firsthand. We were talking before the show how I felt that Charlie Street was like the cleanest food in New York City. Like my stomach never felt better and more full and still very lean after leaving. Obviously, you guys took steps with Charlie Street. We could talk about that if you want, but I'm also kind of curious from a New York City perspective. Is there another clean spot in New York City that New Yorkers can go find to eat and leave their stomachs feeling full, clean, happy, healthy, joyful?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me the question, like, where do I eat for lunch? And typically it's like, if it's not at the restaurant, it's not at, the one hotel with the amazing, like the team there that I have and the menu we've put forward, it's probably at home. Only because like one, I love cooking. As I talked earlier about caramelized onions, I like watching a chicken just like sear and like watching it caramelize and then turning it and then adding, you know, a little bit of stock and watching the juice stay. Like that to me is like, fuck yeah, dude. Like I love that. Like I love that so much. And then obviously just like pairing it with starch and vegetables. And I mean, that's how I love, but obviously that's me. And so in answer to the question, is there anyone else? I mean, like I get the occasional sweet green. I think they've done a pretty decent job considering the issues that we face with resources and, you know, supply chain. I also like Dig. Like I think Dig's done a really good job too. I think you could honestly look at a bunch of places and say, look, despite the situation, if you look at quality and convenience, there are some places that we can go in the city that hit, you know, a good 80% of that, as opposed to getting something shit. Like you can make the objective decision to go one way or the other. Pretty simple. But yeah, again, cook more, prep more if you want, or just go to some of those select places.
You mentioned the Osprey. Let's touch on that briefly. What does that opportunity mean to you to be the executive chef over there?
Oh man, that's huge. You know, to be asked to be the executive chef of a hotel restaurant as the one, like the one is to me one of the pinnacles of a brand that I look up to. So to be asked to be there and do that and have my name on the restaurant's pretty cool. The team are amazing. So yeah, that was I guess a moment for me going, fuck, that's exciting. Like a lot of my mates in Australia who are chefs going, fuck, that's really cool. So it's great. I love it. I love the ability to also have forward thinking when it comes to sustainability. They're huge on that. So like they're open to ideas to create you know, more awareness around that. You know, it's unbelievable. So yeah, I'm excited for what that future holds there too.
I've had an awesome time here today. I want to be respectful of your time. This has been so much fun, honestly, like an out-of-body experience, surreal moment, truly. And there's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'm now going to pose to you as we round this thing out. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now, assuming he's in that ideal spot, were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Honestly, I'd say the same thing to myself that I said to myself like 10 years ago, but just keep doing what you're doing because you're following your gut and you're persisting. That's honestly all it is.
Persistence. You heard it from the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Churchill, please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, man. Thanks, dude. So I guess go to TikTok, could be Dan Churchill or The Healthy Chef. Instagram is Dan_Churchill. You can go to danchurchill.com for recipes and stuff on the website, and to also pick up the cookbook. And you can actually get that wherever books are sold, whether it be Amazon, book retailers. Yeah, we're pretty much everywhere. That's great.
This was awesome, man. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Churchill. Once again, my name is Jonathan Cohen, and this is Inside the Inspired.